good morning, and good morning again. Listen, happy Saturday to you. You finally made it to the end of another work week. What an awesome God we serve. I am so glad to welcome you to another broadcast session of Real Talk, looking and speaking on life's issues, connecting series. We have been hanging out together for several weeks in this concept looking for love in all the wrong places. Listen, you all have been outstanding in your responses. And we are just here today one more time. Want to say welcome to our Facebook Live family. Those of you that have joined us by way of Facebook Live, we certainly say good morning to you today. And then for those of you that may have joined us by way of our YouTube channel, Dr. K.O. Williams Ministry, we certainly want to say to you as well, good morning. I want to take just a quick moment. We have an amazing guest. You all have asked, and we've responded for him to come back. And so I want to give optimal time for him to address you and your questions today. But let me tell you how you can connect with us, and maybe you want to share this with one of your friends. First and foremost, you can connect with us on Facebook Live. There it is right there, Dr. K.O. Williams Ministry. You can also connect with us on YouTube. And I want you to pay close attention. Several have asked for that YouTube handle as well. There it is with the space between Williams and Ministry. And then you can, yes, also dial in on the phone. I want you to also pay attention to the far left. Many of you have already gotten a hold of this concept. If you want us to bring in new ideas, new topics, new discussion areas, all you have to do is in the bottom left, there's a link that you can engage, bit.ly/real talk your voice. If you will send an email there, I tell you what, we'll capture that and our team will process it and find out how we can best bring a panelist on to address your concerns. This broadcast has 4 basic areas that we cover addressing life's issues. We have straight, honest, transparent conversation. Listen, my friends, this is not for somebody who's a baby, underage. Listen, we make the disclaimer up front. This is for mature adult audiences only. We have practical tools for your toolbox. We saw just this past week that our guest panelists offered resources as well, and then anyone can participate. 60 minutes once a week. I tell you what, we go in hard. This is real talk. And so I'm asking you today, once again, to prepare yourself for an amazing session. We're on our way once again. I want to ask you to do me one quick favor. If you will at least say good morning, say hello, say amen. What it does is allows us to give you a shout out over the social media airways. Good morning, Sister Ethel Fredericks, all the way from Virginia, checking in this morning. And you see how we do. That's just how we'll give you a shout out. But it also allows us to know that you're actually joining with us. So we know many join, many see it as well. We're happy as well. And so one last thing, if you will also hit the like button, that'll let us know that you're on board with us, or you're in agreement with us, and if you don't agree, all I ask is that you be respectful in the same way that we're being respectful to you. And then lastly, if you will hit that share button, maybe there's somebody that you know that is struggling with the relationship. And today is a wonderful way for you to say to someone, Kimberly Gainey, good morning, good morning, good morning. We're so happy to have you with us. Come on in this morning. We're asking you to check in with us. And I promise you, you will be informed, engaged, and enlightened as a result of our broadcast today. This is about having healthy, happy relationships. If you're struggling, I promise you there's going to be some tools today that will set you free. Listen. Let's get started. I want to give maximum opportunity for you all to benefit and engage with our guest scholar on today. We had last week a wonderful session with Dr. John Mendez, a practicing licensed counselor and therapist in the Winston-Salem area, known all over the country. I'm telling you right now, I was recently able to be blessed by going to Cuba, and they knew him way over there. His work is all over the world, and what a blessing it is this morning to have his insight to be able to bless us. Let's talk briefly about Dr. Mendez, and then I'm going to give the remainder of our session today to our guest scholar. Dr. Mendez is a retired pastor, some 36, 37 years here in the city of Winston-Salem with the Emmanuel Baptist Church. His work speaks for itself, a champion social justice advocate. But I'm happy today, preacher. Let me tell you, if there are any preachers out there, get your pens and paper ready. I promise you, you'll pick up several sermon topics between now and the time he gives benediction. And then what an awesome privilege. He is an accomplished counselor and therapist with the Mindsight Counseling Services out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. You have his information on the screen, and I'm going to ask at this time that you would do me a favor. If you have questions, you can send those in, and we'll be monitoring those to make sure we try to get those over to Dr. Mendez. Dr. Mendez, listen, the audience all over the country have been asking for you to return again. One of my friends, good morning, all the way in Mississippi, said, please ask Dr. Mendez to come back again. And so, Doc, I want you to know that we're giving you the floor to do whatever the good Lord says for you. Good morning, Mr. Flanagan, another strong mentor of mine way down in Jacksonville, North Carolina, actually my elementary school teacher. What an awesome privilege it is this morning to have him tuning in. We'll continue to give those shout outs. Dr. Mendez, thank you again for coming, and we yield to you and Lady Mendez at this time.
Thank you so much, Dr. Williams, for this opportunity again. And I was so thrilled by what you talked about last week. I thought about it much this week. I was in D.C., and I just got back, and I wanted to be prepared for this program today. But you are doing a wonderful work addressing topics that often get ignored. And I think so much of it is because our society. And I want to emphasize and talk a few minutes about the background of what I want to talk about in a few minutes as it relates to the invisible relationship. But it's sort of like a crash course in psychotherapy, psychoanalysis, and where the emphasis is that will help us in our relationships and in our marriage and whatnot. So I want to pick up from those boundaries that you were talking about on last week and contextualize it in terms of relationships. A very popular literary writer by the name of D.R. Lawrence wrote this quote that struck me, and I want to begin with it. He said that what man most passionately wants in his living wholeness and his living unison, not his own isolate salvation of his soul. The emphasis on living wholeness and living unison, I interpret it in terms of relationships and the belief that our healing and salvation comes not through isolation, not through separation, but actually through relationships, which really what I want to talk about this morning. I began after I read that I wanted to correct some misconceptions that lead people to feel that their marriages or relationships are failures, or that change is impossible. and to give people a way of looking at their relationships that would build compassion, forgiveness, and the possibility of growth. Um, and I thought I would share some of my values, some of my convictions about relationships. One is rather than independence, I emphasize interdependence. Um, I think that's healthy. We society basically teaches us to be independent, but in reality, we are all dependent on something or somebody or somebodies. And it's important to recognize the importance of interdependence. Relationships are the best place to solve any individual emotional or psychological problems. Relationships are the best place to solve individual psychological problems. And we're going to talk a little bit about this next point in a few minutes. Childhood experiences unconsciously affect and often distort the way we see our partners. Let me emphasize that again. Childhood experiences unconsciously affect and often distort the way we see our partners. Everyday conflicts become power struggles because they come to symbolize childhood issues. And we're not aware of that. But childhood issues generally is at the center of many of our conflicts. Also, we create and sustain dysfunctional patterns of relating uh, to provide protection from our greatest pain. Let me introduce that again. We create and sustain dysfunctional patterns of relating to provide protection from our greatest pain. Understanding the protection that these patterns and power struggles offer is a starting point for working on the relationship. And I'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Lastly, we should know that transformation is possible, even in the most hopeless and painful relationships, if the partners can come to feel empathy for each other. And that's where I really want to end this morning. That it's imperative that we feel empathy, get to know empathy for the other. And then it opens up a path to bring about some form of reconciliation within uh, the relationship. Now, let me emphasize that we live in a society where the values is placed on the individual. Our heroes are either entrepreneurs or adventurers. The human potential of the last 30 years places tremendous emphasis on self awareness and personal growth and personal development. And that's good because it has created a lot of opportunities. We feel productive. We feel self-reliant, and it gives us a sense of individual freedom and expression. But also, it brings about some serious liabilities. So many of our relationships end up in divorce. Why, you may ask? Many of the most vulnerable members of our community suffer from neglect, and values of cooperation and connection often take a back seat to values of success and individual initiative. We know how to compete, but we have a difficult time being able to cooperate, so that couples in pain often feel alone and isolated. They have images in the media that accurately reflect the experiences that they're having. They have unrealistic, idealistic views of relationships and feel ashamed about not being able to live up to those ideals. And shame often is at the center of how we feel, and it keeps us from talking about it, sharing it, even within, let's say, among our friends in other relationships. They're not talking about the shame, they're not talking about the pain and the problems they're having in their relationships. So we keep it secret. We keep it quiet. We don't want to talk about it because of feelings of shame. And so much of it has to do with our individual, separate, isolated, alienated approach to life. And we have grown up, developed with those particular values in mind. I want to submit that relationships are really at the center of who we are. Before I really emphasize that, let me give a little bit background why this individualism exists as it does. It's almost been 100 years since Sigmund Freud introduced the revolutionary theory of the unconscious mind. And that's where we're going to begin our emphasis this morning. 100 years ago, he introduced, more than 100 years ago now, he introduced the whole concept of the unconscious mind. And since that time, a great deal of research has gone into trying to understand and study the unconscious mind, um, particularly emphasizing our individual psychics. We have focused on understanding our dreams, our deepest motivations, our inner conflicts, which basically take place within the unconscious. And the effort has opened up great vistas, if you will, of human understanding in terms of trying to understand our unconscious minds and thinking. And this was Freud who invented the whole concept of psychoanalysis, which really seeks to understand what's going on in the deepest part of our unconscious. But recent advances, well, let me emphasize this. Um, Bouncing off Sigmund Freud's theory, um, it emphasized individual instinctual drives, which he says becomes the motivation for our human behavior. And many of you may be familiar with the whole concept of the id, ego, and superego, which represent instinctual drives. But recent advances of study show that early childhood development um, uh, uh, is important and really at the basis of who we are. Other um, uh, theorists and analysts um, who have broken with Freud emphasize the importance of relationships, not instinctual drives. And it's important to recognize that the basic motivation and drive that we see in a child, um, give you an emphasis. I have a great grand now, and I watched that child reach out early in life, wanting a relationship, wanting to be in a relationship um, with the caregiver or the parent. They find that the deepest human need is is to be in a loving relationship and where their emotional needs can be met and there's a sense of entombment that takes place. Um, in other words, what I'm saying is at the center of human existence is the need to be in a relationship. Um, and theorists such as Heinz Kohut and others now emphasize and have taken psychoanalysis to a level where it's predicated on, based on uh, relationships. And I remember years ago in my own training, I shifted to a more relational model that emphasizes the importance of relationship. So if our salvation, as Lawrence suggests, is to come not from an isolated, but from a relational, connecting relationship where feelings exist toward our partners. The invisible marriage, the invisible relationship is not a type of pathology, but rather it is a term that describes the way we love here, struggling with needs that can never be fully met, with fears that can overwhelm us, living our lives together. In other words, what I emphasized last week, that relationships are not easy. Relationships, in fact, are difficult, but relationships are real and they are possible. And they really explain and talk about where we are and what it is that we need. Now, let me get to the topic. Um, when I look at couples, in my experience with couples, relationships, marriages, a crucial piece that's missing from their understanding of their relationships is that they do not completely know what their fight is all about. Um, Most couples don't know why they are having such strong feelings that result in a lot of tension and conflict within their relationships. They have been looking at the visible aspects of their relationships, the things that they say, the things that they do. But all of these problems stem not from the visible, objective parts of the relationship, but from the subjective world of the unconscious mind. We're not aware of what's happening within us. And I want to give you a good example of what I'm talking about. It's been many years now, but one morning, one night, my wife asked me to get her a glass of hot milk, put it on the table next to the bed. And then she said, tuck me in. And she had never asked me to do that before. And I stopped and I wondered what was going on here. And I asked her, what are you feeling? Not what you're thinking, but what are you feeling at this point? Where is this coming from? I'm going to do it, but I'm just curious. What are you feeling right now? Where is this coming from? And she thought about it for a moment, and then she said, that's what my father used to do for me. I did it. I could have said, that's crazy. That's dumb. Where's that coming from? And she never would have asked me to do it again, and she would have been angry with me. But I did it, and of course, I was rewarded nicely later. What am I talking about? That was not the 47-year-old woman that I know asking me to do that. That was the 7-year-old little girl feeling, wanting to relive that experience way back at 7 years old. To make my point, oftentimes the unconscious reveals itself in our relationships. And so much of what we fight about has nothing to do with what's happening in the present, but a lot of it goes back to our childhood, what we were feeling, what we experienced in terms of injury then, and we're looking for healing 20, 30, 40, 50 years later. But we continue to relive those experiences. Um, Childhood memories of both pleasure and pain of our earlier relationships are stored in the unconscious. And the unconscious controls, dominates our behavior more than our consciousness. So it's important to recognize the difference. A modern psychologist, um, I should say modern psychologists, recognize the importance of relationships. Um, Shakespeare, in one of my favorite Shakespearean plays, A Midsummer Night's Dream, puts in the mouth of one of the characters, love looks not with the eyes, but with the unconscious mind. How true that was. Um, the our romantic yearnings and feelings, our romantic feelings, our romantic urges, oftentimes reflect the unconscious mind. And when we're looking at each other, we basically focus on, as I said earlier, what is conscious, but we overlook and miss what is unconscious. And oftentimes, our unconscious fears are negatively distorting or exaggerating reality. Um, the unconscious dynamics of relationships can have painful and sometimes tragic effects. Without an understanding of the unconscious dynamics of relationships, where we end up is blaming um, our partners, and we feel a lot of guilt within ourselves. Um, but when we begin to become aware of the deeper reasons for our own and our partner's behavior, trying to understand each other, childhood, development, in a word, um, a sense of becoming, something very uh, powerful happens when we try to understand the unconscious and become aware of each other's childhood and development. Blame and guilt becomes replaced by understanding and compassion. Issues that seem insurmountable now lend themselves to compromises. And I want to emphasize that at the very heart of any relationship or marriage is compromise. That's the magic word. As I mentioned last week, we come from two different worlds. And in one world, you're used to doing things a certain way. And in the other partner's world, used to doing things in certain ways. When you get together, the conflict is immediate. And when it becomes a power struggle, somebody's got to win and somebody has to lose. And the winner takes all, and the loser ends up with nothing. But the power struggle continues on and on and on. So that in relationships, each partner unconsciously has fears and yearnings um, that manifest themselves within the relationship. So, despite our conscious intentions, these unconscious fears and yearnings control our experience of the relationship. Um, Let me reemphasize something that I mentioned last week, and that is I want to remind you of the stages of the invisible marriage or the stages of the invisible relationships. Most relationships go through these three phrases that I emphasized last week, and I just want to sort of change the language a little bit. First, the hopeful or honeymoon phase of the relationship. In the honeymoon phase, feelings are dominated by unconscious yearnings, such as yearning to, let's say, um, my wife, recreating that relationship with her father. Put some milk, warm milk, next to my bed and tuck me in. Yearning for that experience again that her father used to do for her. And I was glad to do it. I didn't argue. I didn't make a big fuss about it, but I later realized that was the 7-year-old yearning for that part of the relationship. In this phase, we believe that our partners will fulfill our deepest needs to be admired and understood. That has to be at the center of the relationship. We all have that deep yearning to want to feel admired, affirmed, and understood. Language is important. Once we start calling our partners stupid, dumb, we have dehumanized them to the point where we can hurt them, hurt her or him in the worst way and create pain. And it's hard to take that back once it begins. So language is very important because through language we can either humanize or dehumanize our partners. And um, when we see them as dumb and stupid, we have dehumanized them to the point where we now feel free to hurt him or her. Language is important. Last week I mentioned something about fighting fair, and I'll emphasize that again before I close. Um, uh, but when we miss that, something disappointing happens, a conflict develops, or traits we haven't seen before in our partners emerge. And I mentioned that um, earlier. And we see things that we missed in this next stage. And we become aware of things that um, we overlooked in that exciting honeymoon stage. And we call this a reality check. Reality kicks in. And in this particular stage, um, sometimes we experience disappointment and we find ourselves in a struggle. Uh, but if we stay together, the relationship settles and it settles into fixed patterns. And I mentioned this last week, but I want to mention it now. The relationship settles into mixed patterns. And this fixation is the hallmark of the accommodating or accommodation phase. And sometimes we simply get used to the conflict. So people may stay together a long time, but learn how to live with the conflict, um, which goes on more or less continuously. And you're there, but you no longer enjoy the relationship, but you learn to live with the conflict. Other times we develop a, a strategy for avoiding each other. You're in the same house, but you avoid each other. You don't speak to each other. You don't deal with each other. You don't have sex. You're just there and you live separate lives under the same roof. The need for protection from deep emotional pain predominates in the accommodation phase so that you learn to live with the pain, but the conflict is characterized by protecting your particular emotional pain that you're feeling. Um, So it's important to know that if you're in a relationship, how to get through that most difficult time. And I want to emphasize to sort of hurry forward, that we got to make the invisible visible. We got to make the invisible visible so that when you find yourself caught in the uncertainty and pain of the struggle phase of a relationship, or you feel locked into the stultifying patterns of the accommodation phase, there is a way out. You can become conscious of what your real needs are in the relationship and learn to communicate them clearly. And you can become conscious of who your partner really is and learn to meet rather than frustrate his or her needs. So that making the invisible marriage visible will enable you to do certain things. Like one, change stuck patterns, change the patterns that you're stuck on. Stop blaming your partner. Stop blaming yourself. Learn to ask for what you really need. Learn to meet your partner's deepest needs. And um, I don't have time to elaborate on all of these right now, but just let me emphasize them and then we'll go to the questions. Change the patterns that you're stuck on. Stop blaming your partner, but rather try to understand your partner. Stop blaming yourself, feeling guilty, but try to understand yourself. Learn to ask for what you really need. Partners don't like to talk to each other or express their needs. Learn your needs, know your needs, share your needs, talk about your needs. Learn to meet your partner's deepest needs. These are a way out of that unconscious aspect of your relationship. Okay, I'm open for questions now.
Wow, Dr. Mendez, thank you so much. I have several questions that have been pouring in, and we want to leverage your wisdom and insight. The first question is, how do I know my partner and I are a good fit?
Remember last week I talked about how we pick partners. Um, a lot of times we think we have consciously um, picked or have chosen our partners. The truth is, the mind only knows certain patterns, and those patterns reflect actually our unconscious mind, in the sense that um, uh, they reflect our caregivers, for better or for worse. We pick somebody like our parents or somebody like our caregiver. We pick somebody, as I mentioned, who's going to heal our childhood wounds. When my wife asked me to get her some milk and put it next to her bed, um, she was feeling her relationship with her father at that particular point, because that's what he used to do for her. So by picking me, she was picking somebody similar to her father. And her expectations were, he's going to be good to me, deal with my deepest childhood needs and pains. And all of this is unconscious, but it's happening and it controls us and it dominates us. So we generally pick somebody like our partner, if our caregivers, and if our relationships were bad and negative, then a lot of times we pick somebody like that. The important thing is to change the patterns of our past, particularly if they've been negative, so that um, our conscious mind now reflects different yearnings and different needs that are healthy rather than unhealthy.
Very good. That's a great response. I hope the listener was able to capture that. Dr. Mendez, there's another question. Is it normal if you do not let your partner do something just because you feel jealous or angry?
Okay, again, I emphasize the importance of knowing each other's needs.
Mm-hmm.
On the one hand, you are individuals. And like, for instance, my wife likes to bowl. I don't. So it's important for her to bowl. I got certain things that I like, she doesn't like. Um, I like model trains. I like outdoors. I like adventure. I like photography. And I find myself, sometimes she will go with me. Sometimes she doesn't want to go. But she knows I like to go. I like outside. I'm an adventurer. She lets me do that. Okay. Those fears that I talked about, that contributes to our jealousies, to our fears, to our anger, reflects our insecurities because we're not expressing and sharing our needs. And our needs are not being met. And we don't express that to each other. Let me emphasize again the importance of sharing your needs, talking about what your needs are, um, and willing to meet those particular needs. What jealousy and fear does, it blocks you from and interrupts you from meeting those deepest needs. It reflects insecurities that are predicated on you not sharing your particular needs. But I can't emphasize it enough to talk about sharing needs, what those needs are, and letting the individual be an individual, and not being feeling threatened by each other's individuality. Because as a couple, it's important that you be together, but also you're together as individuals. You come from two different worlds, and you got to compromise and negotiate yourselves to becoming that one that the
Mm.
Bible talks about, being one, becoming one. That's a lifetime struggle.
Well, that leads us right up to question number three. Question listener number two. I hope you benefited from that. This listener says, I tend to say sorry to my partner, even though it's not my fault. Is this wrong?
Yeah, that falls back into that pattern of settling, feeling guilty. Um, it's important, again, to talk to each other about reality. If feeling, you find yourself still feeling sorry, and it's not your fault, you're feeling guilty somewhere in your development and growth. You learn to go along to get along. That only um, messes with your feelings, really. And eventually that's going to run out. You're going to get angry, and you'll start acting it out. Um, when I talked about fighting fair last week, it's important. Sometimes you may have to make an appointment. And when you make an appointment, you want to be able to say, "You hurt me."
That
What
is
you said hurt me. And it's important for the other person to repeat what you have said. I hurt you when I said such and such a thing, or when I did such and such a thing. Um, that is your opportunity to emphasize that one thing and not go back and bring up a whole lifetime of issues, but emphasize that one thing. The partner might say, okay, I didn't realize I did that, I said that, or that was not the case. You get some kind of explanation for what was said and done. Why is that important? Because you want the other person to feel and experience empathy for what it is that you're feeling. But if you let it go along to get along, eventually it's going to blow up and it's going to become problematic later on. But once you get through it that one time, let it go, put it behind you. My Apache brothers and sisters have taught me to look to the West
mm,
and throw away what is no longer helpful and necessary in the relationship. And sometimes you just may have to do that. Um, uh, but don't go along to get along, because it doesn't last. It will blow up, but learn to deal with issues as they come up and not take them necessarily personal, but realize that we do hurt each other and conflict is a part of the relationship.
wow. So I think that's awesome, Dr. Mendez. Thank you for that response. I got two more. I'll try to see if I can get them in. The first one is please ask Dr. Mendez to explain, how do I know when I'm in a toxic relationship?
Uh, when the relationship degenerates to the level of either violence, physical violence, or psychological violence. A lot of relationships are not necessarily physically violent, but psychologically and mentally violent. When you feel a sense of devalue, like you no longer matter, you're not speaking to each other, you ignoring each other, or you spend more time hurting than you do feeling good. Um, the other person may have grown up angry and brings that to the relationship. And if you can't work through it, work it out, then you're in a toxic relationship. Um, and that does happen sometimes. Sometimes we ignore what our mind tells us, and our mind will tell you he or she is not the one, but we don't listen to that. Or when you first meet each other, and this is important, you tell each other who you really are, but you ignore it. You hear certain things in the beginning, and the other person is telling you all about themselves, how they feel about anger, how they handle problems, etc. In the very beginning, people are telling you who they are. But if your attraction is only physical, and you don't listen to what's being said, how you're being treated, then um, you may be headed for a toxic relationship. But never tolerate anybody devaluing you, depersonalizing you, or dehumanizing you. Um, that you should never tolerate. The first curse at you, the first put down should be dealt with then. It only gets worse as time goes by.
Very good, Doc. And the last one, I think you can just give them a 30-second answer. They say that, um, do I have to get along with my partner's family in order to have a relationship with the partner?
I mentioned last week about you and your partner making your relationship intentional. That means it's going to be your relationship, not your parents, not your friends, or whatever it is. You and your partner must be intentional in making your relationship what you want it to be, not somebody else's.
Powerful. Dr. Mendez, I am like a 2-year in a candy store. Listen, this has been phenomenal. I mean, the questions keep coming in. I'm going to have to cut it off right there because I want people in the listening audience to be able to hear some final words from you on how they might be able to contact you. I want to speak directly to our viewers. Many of you from all over the country have been asking how you might be able to contact Dr. Mendez to be able to figure out, can you create some more personal sessions, because maybe your situation is a little bit more complex than what we can address in this one session. And so, Dr. Mendez, if you can just give us some last minute thoughts, and then how persons that are viewing might be able to follow up with you with some more personal sessions.
Yeah. Let me emphasize this. I talked about Freud and all of that, but in our African tradition, the emphasis is on relationships. The South Africans, Bishop Tutu, always talked about Ubuntu. I am because we are. It's
Nice.
in our culture. It's in our relationship. Uh, it's in our um, experience to be relational. And I think we need to emphasize, fall back on that, as opposed to just emphasizing what society, how society grows us and cultivates us. But we need to realize that we are relational beings and build on those relationships, because without relationships, we cannot survive in any society.
Very good. And so we have your information on the screen. Viewers, Dr. Mendez is the um, proprietor for the Mind Sight Counseling Services. You see his contact information out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina. Contact number 336-926-8795. And you also can email him directly as well. Again, Dr. Mendez, there are so many people in relationships. We know just from just the engagement here that people are struggling. Many people are suffering. One of the mandates we started at the beginning of this year was creating a platform. Thank you for being honest and transparent, being able to give us just some straight, real talk around tools that can help us as persons in our relationship. I too agree with the Ubuntu mindset. It is the notion to help us realize we're in this together and that no one is an island by themselves. What the pandemic has also shown us is that no matter how strong you are, this pandemic has ripped the band-aid on the individualism and has shown us that you cannot survive in a pandemic without some assistance with someone else. And so thank you again for these relationships. I want to close once again. Our time is up. 60 minutes is out already, but I cannot stop and close our session without asking people. Once again, Dr. Mendez is a licensed practicing counselor and therapist. Listen, I just implore you to reach out to him directly. That's what these broadcasts are for. And I'm excited about the fact that God bless you, Pastor Daryl Napper, as well, for tuning in. We're certainly grateful for you. Let me give another quick shout out to Pastor Michelle McLeod and Bishop McLeod. Thank you as well for tuning in. Teresa Harris, thank you. Ambrose Reunion in Jacksonville, North Carolina. My time is up, but I certainly wanted to thank you all for yours. This has been an amazing session, and I'm just too happy once again to say to you that please go back to the YouTube channel. You can review this entire session. I also want you to go back to last week. Dr. Mendez gave us 2 very profound books that I got on Amazon order already. I can't wait for mine to come in as well. Listen, thank you again, Dr. Mendez. If you will come, give us our closing prayer, and then I'll provide the benediction. God bless you this morning.
Eternal God, we ask that you now breathe on all couples and relationships and renew their strength as thou renews the strength of an eagle, that they may run together, be together, grow together, and develop together into that oneness that you have put in our spirits in the very beginning of creation, that we might fulfill the purpose of our creation together as one. In the strong name of Jesus, we ask it all. Let the redeemed of the Lord say, amen.
Amen. The Lord bless you and the Lord keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you. And may God be gracious unto you. And may he turn his face towards you and give you peace until we meet again next time. Listen, I always close by saying, if you can't love all of me, then leave all of me right where you found me. This is our broadcast on this Saturday. And I say again, Dr. Mendez, thank you for hanging out with us on an early Saturday morning. If I had any doubt before that you love me, it is confirmed today. 2 Saturdays in a row, you've gotten up before 10 o'clock and been on this broadcast. I thank you, and may God bless you all.
Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. God bless you.